Hey, it's David, and you're listening to the Tonebase Classical Guitar Podcast. Hope everyone had a great summer. Really happy to get things rolling again. Just moved to Glasgow, Scotland, which is fantastic for the show, as I'm going to be able to interview and meet some really amazing European guitarists. Speaking of which, I've got Steve Goss on the show. Beautiful composer from Wales originally. He's based in the London area now. And I've been playing his compositions for 3 years now, so it was a real treat for me to not only get to meet him, but to feature him for an episode on this show. He has quite the resume, writing works ever commissioned from various artists, from Zoran Dukic, David Russell, Aniello Desiderio. You'll hear him talk about these projects, which are very exciting to say the least. If you find this interview interesting, I wanted to mention that Steve does have 2 lessons on composition online at Tonebase, and recently has shot a very neat video analyzing Britten's Nocturne for the solo guitar. And this video was actually filmed at Britten's house at the desk with the manuscripts when he composed this piece, which will be quite the lesson. I do have a promo code. If you're not a member already, this gives you $15 off of your next subscription. It is podcast-3, all uppercase and one word, podcast-3. I wasn't sure if I was going to do this or not, but I decided why not. I'm going to play a recording of mine for a change. This was from a live performance. I was playing with great friend of mine, cellist Jacobs-Perkins. This is the first movement from a very neat suite called Park of Idols, and you'll hear Steve talk about it later in the interview, but this movement is inspired by Frank Zappa and is titled Jump Start. So, when did you get started with composition? Was this something that was always with you, or did you kind of discover it later after?
No, I mean, it was something that was always with me. The first instrument I learned was guitar, actually. When at the age of 8, went for guitar lessons. The first week the guy showed me a couple of notes, gave me some exercises to do, and I assumed that the whole point was that I'd go home and then make my own exercises, make my own things up. So I went back and said, look, yeah, that's what you gave me, and this is what I've done. I think he was a bit bemused by that, but that's how it went. So I just thought that's what you did. I just thought that, that was the whole music thing. Is that, they give you some stuff, and you think, okay, you've put the ball over the net, now I'll give you some stuff back. So,
that's interesting. Because most composers I've met, they got started a little bit later, after going through more of a performance route.
Yeah.
What I really love about your style of composition, I mean, you've got a very unique voice, but you're also not afraid to bring in quotes and inspirations from just totally different styles of music outside of classical. I mean, the first piece I worked on was Park of Idols, and of course, you wrote it, but for people who don't know out there, it's cello and guitar, and each movement's inspired by a specific musician. And the first movement starts with Pat Metheny, and then you go to Shostakovich, or sorry, Frank Zappa first.
Frank Zappa first.
I'm sorry. What's it like to harness that style of music and still incorporate it into a classical sense?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big question.
Yeah.
It's always been interested in composers who use quotes, refer to other composers, and I think one of my biggest influences was my PhD supervisor, Peter Dickinson, and he was very much involved in the whole American Charles Ives thing.
Okay.
Making music up from other music and this whole idea of sort of meta music, and also the incorporation of popular music styles into contemporary classical music.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back a long way. But also I think it's just from, and I have an incredibly wide taste for music. I mean, I couldn't bear to sit down and just write modernist concert music the whole day long.
Yeah,
I have too many interests, too many different things. So often I see a project as a chance to really sort of explore another new style of music.
Yeah. Well, what is the Steve Goss Spotify playlist?
Yeah. All kinds of things. I mean, at the moment, I'm writing a solo guitar piece next, which is going to be called Joni. It's based on some Joni Mitchell licks.
Oh, okay.
After that, I'm doing a solo guitar piece for Aniello Desiderio, which is based on Italian opera to a large extent. After that, there's a piece for the percussionist Evelyn Glennie. And that will certainly have some kind of rock, jazz, groove vibe to it.
Yeah.
So
that's going to be a solo piece for percussion?
It's not actually. It's a piece for marimba and Theorbo.
Oh, wow.
Of all things. Yeah, so...
How did that combination come about? I love it.
Well, I'd worked a lot with a theorbist called Matthew Wadsworth. I wrote a solo piece for him and then a concerto. And he was working at a sort of festival, and they were interested in having a piece for him and Evelyn to play together, and they both suggested I could come up with something. So that's that project. Yeah.
And have you put the ensemble together yet?
Oh no, the piece is just a sort of a glint in my eye at the moment.
But I can imagine the instrumentation working well, because the marimba, it does have a soft timbre to it.
It does. I mean, I've done a piece for percussion and guitar. There's a lot of marimba and guitar in that, and that works really nicely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to either have a guitar that has a really punchy sound or have a bit of amplification, but as a combination, actually, I think percussion and guitar is one of the really great underexploited ones.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pain in the butt because you've got to bring all this gear with you. Great big, vibraphone, marimba, various little sort of stands and bits and pieces. So it's
then the guitarist has to learn how to count for once. No.
Well, yes. Actually, in that piece of mine, the guitarist also has to play percussion. So.
Oh, really? Which instrument? Percussion?
Just a few little things, sort of gongs, a couple of drums, bongos. So yeah, but I wrote it for a guitarist, Craig Ogden, who'd also studied percussion. So
yeah,
it kind of made it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that one. I'll have to check it out because there's not many pieces for.
No, this one is actually based on the films of Terry Gilliam, of all pieces. So it's called Dark Knights and Holy Fools.
So that's another thing I wanted to bring up. You have such inspiration for these different styles of music, but you also have great inspiration from other forms of art, from film. Cinema Paradiso, is that the name of the piece?
Yeah.
You wrote for Zoran.
That's right, yeah.
Beautiful piece. I absolutely love that. And
Thank you.
I mean, Cinema Paradiso is my favorite movie. So
it's a great movie. It's a great movie. But, there's no music from that movie in the piece.
Well, but wasn't there like one little quote from the movie or no?
Well, there's a couple of little... I mean, it's full of little naughty things that you sort of put there to irritate and annoy. Or there is a little quote, yeah.
Remind me the story of 451. I remember it was really interesting. I'm sure you get asked this every time. I'm sorry.
Well, it's amazing how much interest.
Controversy.
Not exactly controversy. Although it's the my poor publishers. They had people phoning up the whole time complaining about this. But it's so the idea of 451. So Cinema Paradiso is a set of 6 pieces based on different films, different film directors, and so on. And 451 is based on the Francois Truffaut film Fahrenheit 451, which is based on the Ray Bradbury book. And in this book, basically 451 allegedly is the temperature. 451 degrees Fahrenheit is the temperature at which paper burns. Although Ray Bradbury, when I quizzed about this, said he just sort of heard it somewhere in a pub or something, so it may not be true. But what happens, it's a kind of dystopian future where reading is banned. And houses are fireproof, and the fire brigade come round from house to house burning books. Any books they find are burnt. So what happens is that people, in order to keep books going, they memorize them.
Yeah.
So they teach. So each person becomes a book. So they have to sort of put the whole book to memory.
Yeah.
So the idea of writing a piece based on it, I thought, wouldn't it be great if you had to learn the piece from memory and had to be shown it from memory. So there's no music for the score. The score is burnt.
Did you burn it?
Yeah, I don't even have it on my computer.
You burnt the computer as well? No.
Yeah, burnt in inverted commas. So there is no copy of it. So Zoran memorized it.
Did you give him a recording of it to learn off of?
No, actually, well, I did give him the pictures on paper.
But then you made him burn it.
I made him burn it. Yeah, exactly. and so the whole thing is memorized, and people have to learn it. Someone who knows it has to teach it to them, basically, bit by bit, or they just take it down off the record. Zoran's actually done a lesson for it on the Tonebase website. Takes you through.
It's funny. He was telling me about that, and he was saying it was just such a hilarious day just with coincidences. And then he asked, "What's the microphone you're using?" And it was a AKG 451 microphone. So it was just.
I mean, it was a joke that went on, and we had even the page in the score. Only has the numbers 451 on it, so it's page 14.5 or whatever, and even the catalog number for it is 1154. It's just this insane kind of joke that just kept going. So,
then 100 years from now, people are going, "What's all this about?" Well, it's got to be amazing to have such great artists perform these works. I mean, from Zoran to I remember hearing David Russell perform.
Cantigas de Santiago.
Yeah. That was a really neat piece as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing I enjoy most is working with these people and learning so much from them. Because, each person I work with, they have something new, something I don't know about, something else to sort of show me. So it's been an incredible sort of learning curve for years and years and years, and also just working with the personalities. People often ask me about John Williams. And he's amazing to work with because he's so enthusiastic.
Yeah.
He's like a sort of, 22-year-old, like a little puppy who's going around sort of saying, this project is great, let's do this, what do you think of this? And there's none of these sort of airs and graces. It's all very open and...
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Is it before you begin composing their piece or within the composing process you try to meet with these artists?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of composing as a solitary activity.
Yeah. Not a la Takamitsu going to the...
No, well, I mean...
going to the mountains for 2 weeks or something like that.
It's very much sort of meeting with people, talking with people.
Yeah.
I think my main sort of aim really each time I write a piece is to try and make it as different as possible from the last one. Mm-hmm. Don't necessarily always succeed, but it's a kind of aim. It's the opposite of trying to find your own style. It's a question of saying, right, I've just done that, now I'll do the exact opposite. And so with working with different people, that really helps me think about instruments differently, especially when I write a lot of guitar music. I mean, more than half my music has guitar in it. And so I wouldn't want it to all sound the same. All sound similar. So I try and bring in sort of aspects of different people's playing each time. I'm
really interested to hear about Aniello's piece.
Yeah.
Did he specifically ask for one to be inspired or kind of written off of Italian opera, or was that your idea?
No, it was... I
mean, it's right up his alley.
Oh, I know.
It's going to be fantastic.
He's been nagging me to write a piece for a long time. And of course, it's always a thing of, let's do it. So we finally got the first performance in the book, got the commission arranged. I haven't started writing it yet. The first performance is in March. We're now in beginning of September. But it will
some time.
Yeah, but it's kind of forming in my head. I mean, so often pieces almost form entirely before I sit down at any instrument or any piece of paper or any computer or anything. The sort of sound world, the concepts. And I have a Spotify playlist for Aniello's piece of many, many Italian opera pieces.
Yeah.
But when we first talked about the piece, he was like, do whatever you want. I leave it entirely up to you. Do whatever you want. And I said, no, I can't work like that. I must... it must be something we're both, very committed to, very into. So I gave him a list, I think, of 3 or 4 potential projects.
Yeah.
And again, he was very sort of coy. And then he said, well, Steve, I love Italian opera. And so it's going to be that.
Yeah.
So some kind of fantasy that involves lots of well-known, sort of late 19th century Italian opera.
And where's the premiere going to be?
In Moscow, in the Tchaikovsky Hall.
Oh, okay,
In
yeah.
Moscow, yeah. And in March. And it's the piece has got a title already. It's called Verismo.
Okay.
After the Verismo style of opera. So yeah, that should be fun. But it'll be very Aniello in the same way that I think David Russell's piece is very David.
Yeah. I mean, when you said Italian opera and Aniello, I just thought that's damn perfect. That's going to be great. And we're in your studio right now, and I mean, I do see guitars.
Yeah.
But I see a nice piano. Are you, when you compose, I mean, I know you just said you kind of formulate a lot of melodies or harmonies in your head. Do you compose at the piano quite a bit?
Yes and no. I mean, I do almost everything actually away from this room. I think about pieces all the time so that they have characters and shapes and structures and different kind of textures that are all in my mind. They're all very unfocused.
Yeah.
But the piece kind of takes a shape, and I spend a lot of time just writing shapes on pieces of paper, numbers of movements, structures, balance between fast and slow, high and low, dense and empty, really tight rhythmically and spacious, thinking about those timings and those things. So a lot of this planning goes on so that by the time I actually start writing the notes out, the whole piece is kind of formed in my mind, and then I'm just trying to actually just pin it down.
Okay. So it's just bringing it all out onto one sheet of paper.
Yeah, and at that stage I do use piano. I use guitar a bit. I don't use a guitar at all if I'm not writing for guitar.
Yeah.
Not at all. But when I am writing for guitar, it's handy to have it there, especially just to try things out.
Yeah.
What I had to do recently was buy a smaller, lighter guitar because I was finding I'd just sort of pick it up, standing sitting there for hours, do something ridiculously stretchy for 5 minutes,
then your hands
then put it down, and I think, oh my god. So it's so the instruments are around, but
so is it like a little parlor guitar that you use now, or
it's just a short scale. It's
like a 630 or
628, and it's narrow and it's light. So
that works out nice. Yeah.
So it's very, very nice. But it's weird because I used to play concerts and stopped 4 years ago. Did our last concert with my quartet at the Iserlohn Festival in Germany, and haven't played a concert since then, and haven't really practiced since then.
Yeah. What was it like walking off the stage for?
It was fine. I mean,
was it a bit bitter? Well, obviously bittersweet in a sense, or
yes and no. I mean, I was finding it. As getting older, it becomes increasingly difficult to keep your playing up to the required level.
Yeah.
You can't be shit, basically.
Yeah.
It's
or then everyone knows your name when you're
and so you have to put in a lot of work, and it's not fun. It's like working out in the gym endlessly.
Yeah.
And then you find that you do a concert and the playing is, probably just about as good as it was last time, but maybe 0.5% not so good. And of course, all the practicing time was taking me away from composing, And
you wanted to focus.
And I wanted to focus on that. And it was getting very frustrating not to have enough time to write. But the funny thing is, the more things you take out of your life, you still don't have enough time to write because you take on more pieces and forever goes on. But it was, of course, I love playing. I just didn't like practicing.
Yeah. Were you mainly a chamber performer, or were you doing solo?
I mean, it was. I started off doing solo stuff and a lot of contemporary music. So I played in a lot of contemporary music ensembles. Then did a lot of concerts with my wife, who's a singer, for many years. And then with my quartet, Tetra, we played 27 years, basically, on the road.
Wow.
Went all over the place, had a wonderful time.
That's a good run.
Yeah, it was fun.
Did you play any of your compositions with them?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'm sure the reason I got really started as a composer sort of more broadly was when people heard my groups play my pieces, my songs, my quartets, and so on. And that's kind of how it started. It's people saying, "Oh, that's really. Can you write something for me?" And so on.
It's nice to know you got like really good performers to be able to play your piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I don't think of myself as a performer or a composer, but basically a musician. So a musician plays instruments and produces music. And so this whole idea of transcription, arrangement, composition, it's all one thing.
Yeah.
Really. I don't... sometimes when I'm collaborating with people, I don't even like taking my name as the name on the composition. Sometimes they've put in just as much. I did a concerto once for piano, saxophone, cello, double bass, and violin, and orchestra. And most of the ideas from the piece came from the pianist, a pianist called Graham Caskey, who I've worked with an awful lot. And he just has brilliant ideas and fantastic concepts. And the idea was to take well-known music and completely transform it.
Yeah.
So, like do the slow movement of the Rachmaninoff cello sonata like a kind of stomp, 1920s stomp, up-tempo stomp, and then do last movement of Beethoven piano sonata in the style of a Piazzolla tango, etc.
Huh.
So he'd have all these ideas and play them on the piano, and I would, basically just curate the project. And so, I thought of that very much as his piece, but he wouldn't go anywhere near the authorial moment. And in fact, I found the whole composer thing, just having one name on the score, very strange thing.
I never thought of it that way, but it a lot of collaboration can go into.
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
the way you go about music. It's too bad it's not always like that.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Different people collaborate to different levels. The concerto I wrote, which John Williams recorded, wasn't actually written for him. It was written for a friend of mine called Graham Roberts.
Okay.
And collaborating with him was amazing because he had all these incredible ideas. He'd sort of describe the kind of thing that he wanted, and we'd sit down, and I'd even give him things like I'd say, well, I'm thinking of using these kinds of textures and these kind of chords, and I'd give him stuff to improvise on, and we'd meet up, and I'd just sit there saying, well, try this, try that, try the other, record it all, and then take away those recordings. I wouldn't necessarily write them down off the tape and use them in the piece, but they would provide an awful lot of the kind of raw material that the piece comes from,
So how did it go about with John Williams then recording the piece?
Well, it was fine. That piece, it was wrote it all down, wrote it all out. Graham played it. John Williams heard one of Graham's performances, liked the piece a lot, wanted to play it, toured it, recorded it. So he just played, the written part. And sometimes it is a bit weird when other people play music I've written for a very specific guitarist. But actually, sometimes it's the new person comes in and they do it in a different way that's just as interesting, just as good, just as fascinating. And I loathe this idea of the definitive performance or the right way of doing it, and imagining somehow just because a performer worked with a composer, that's the way you should do the piece. It's something that guitarists have always fallen into this trap. There's a big issue, I think, with all the Bream repertoire. Bream was an incredibly imaginative and fantastic performer, but brought so much of his world into each piece. And people have mistaken that, imagining the piece has to be played that way.
That was his way of playing it.
Exactly.
It was amazing. I love it. But,
totally. But it's not the only way to do it.
But if you look at Glenn Gould, he started and ended his career with the Bach.
Yeah,
it was
Goldbergs,
totally different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I do like players who play things differently. And so
Keep
mix
it
things
fresh.
up a bit. Paul Galbraith, we were talking about before we started recording, and he's someone, I went to a concert of his once, and he wanted to play the Prelude, Fugue and Allegro twice in the concert in two completely different ways.
Really?
Yeah. That was in
same key?
Same everything, but just in terms of fingers and keys, but just to do different tempi, different relationships, different ways of playing it.
And it was totally
different.
Fresh, even though it wasn't in succession, or was it?
It was two different parts.
That would be a lot.
That's right.
It's like I've been in concerts where they're like, I didn't prepare any encore material, but I'm going to play the first piece again, and then they play it exactly the same. You just want to go home.
We were talking about John Williams just now. He's just recorded a Baroque album. It's called Vivaldi, etc. And on it is a recording of Prelude, Fugue and Allegro. And he plays the prelude in a way that's totally different from how he played it. Well, obviously 50 years ago when he recorded it. Tempo's moving all over the place. And there's a lot more sort of rubato. He even adds a bar at one point because he thinks it sounds good.
Wow.
So there's this kind of completely sort of wonderful freedom about it.
That's crazy.
That's so removed from how he used to do it.
Well, it's great to hear that he's still playing and performing. It sounds like enjoying himself. Because if I remember correctly, wasn't it about 7 years ago he said he was going to retire from the... And then I guess that didn't happen.
Well, it sort of did. He said he was going to retire from playing solo concerts and from touring overseas. And that's what
I guess I misread it.
So, in fact, his last big public concert in London was him playing my concerto in the Festival Hall. He also played the Aranjuez. It was an amazing night. It was incredible. But since then, he still carries on, commissioning things. He commissioned a chamber piece for me for violin, two guitars, double bass, and percussion. called Flower Cities, which is it's a great to have two guitars in a chamber ensemble.
Yeah.
It's a very cool thing.
Get the projection going a bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been done a few times, and with John's done it with Craig Ogden mostly, but also Gary Ryan's done it, and then other groups have done it. But it's a great combination.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a really good way forward in a mixed ensemble, is to have two guitars rather than one, because you've got this kind of uber guitar, which is,
And John commissioned that specific instrumentation.
Yeah, well, we talked about it. He wanted clarinet, and I had this violinist I was working with at the time who was amazing, and I said, you've got to have Max Bailey. He's just great.
Yeah.
So we did that, yeah. And so he commissioned that, and then a couple of years later, in fact, he was the one who introduced me to Matthew Wadsworth, a Theorbo player, and it was John who commissioned my only solo Theorbo piece.
Yeah.
He said, I think you should write a piece for Matt. I'm going to commission it. Here's the fee, off you go. But John would never, he'd probably be quite embarrassed I'm talking about it now on a podcast, but he'd never make a song and dance about it. He'd just think, that would be good to do this and make this happen. So,
yeah.
And shortly before Philip Houghton died, John brought him over to London for performances of his music and to meet all sorts of people over here. So he's always got these sort of little projects and meetings and things going on.
Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
And he sounds like such a humble person, despite everything he's accomplished.
Yeah, he is, totally. And I mean, nothing makes him feel more uncomfortable than people just sycophants coming up to him and telling him how wonderful he is.
Yeah,
so, it's
probably the last thing you want to hear when you dealt with that for
exactly.
so many
just wants to
years.
just play some music, have a chat, talk about football or politics.
I didn't know he was who's his team, or can we not say?
Oh, you can say. I mean, he's Arsenal like me, although largely through his son. But we've been to the football together.
Oh, that'll be a story to tell for a while. I went to a football match with John Williams. I wish I had that. I don't follow football. Well, for our American listeners, just in case they don't know, football means soccer here across the pond.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not that American football game that people claim is a sport. It's just not my cup of tea. But I guess this isn't a sports podcast. But who knows? Maybe we'll do an interview at Wembley Stadium right on the sideline. How about that?
Sounds good.
So you've worked on quite a few concertos over the past couple years.
Well, in the last 10 years, I've written 10, basically.
So one a year.
Yeah, on average.
Yeah.
And some years 2, other years none. But for 7 of them involve the guitar. One of them is a piano concerto. One's a concerto for 5, which I mentioned earlier. And there's a Theorbo concerto too. So the latest one was a concerto for 2 guitars, an orchestra, called the Koblenz Concerto. And that was for solo duo, Lorenzo Micheli and Matteo Mella.
Yeah.
It was great working with those guys. I mean, they're
I could only imagine.
Unbelievably wonderful people and, of course, great artists. So that was a great project also because I had a big orchestra to work with. So, big fat brass section. So, 2 trumpets, 4 horns, 3 trombones, bass trombone, lots of percussion, lots of wind. So it was, a big project, a big sort of half-hour piece that's uninterrupted. Just straight through.
Oh, just one long movement.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of in 5 sections. It's about the River Rhine.
Oh, okay.
So it's called the Koblenz Concerto because it was written for the Koblenz International Festival. And so it follows various other episodes on the Rhine.
So when you compose a concerto, besides the obvious difference in instrumentation and everything, do you find your approach is totally different, or do you try to keep things same as you go by?
It's interesting. I try and keep my approach different for every piece I write, but there are certain things that I find in my orchestral writing that keep coming back, like thumbprints, certain kinds of texture, certain combinations of instruments. And I don't do it consciously necessarily. I think it's just it's part of my idiolect, or just perhaps part of my shortcomings as an orchestrator, that I keep relying on these sorts of things. The big difference with writing an orchestral piece is that you have to write it so it can play off the page. You walk into the room with an orchestra and the clock is ticking. There's 100 people there, and the money is going fast.
Yeah.
And so if you write something which is going to cause problems or take extra time or not be able to be done in the amount of available rehearsal time you have, then you've got to then you're in trouble. So you know, in a way, the funny thing is when you're writing for orchestra, you have to be slightly conservative and write in a way that you know will work. Whereas if you're writing for soloists or for chamber groups, you can often take big risks, try crazy things, and go into a room with them and have a laugh when it doesn't work, you know, and then go and think, okay, so if that doesn't work, I'll try something else. Whereas with the concertos, you know, certainly on the orchestral side, you've got to just turn up with it all ready and all done.
When you're paying union dues and everything.
It's just that thing, and it has to, you know, it has to line to the fingers, has to be kind of. So the risk taking doesn't really take place there. You just sort of play with colors, and you have, you know, other ways of working within those restrictions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For our U.S. listeners, I'm sure some of them have heard this new. Well, not as new now as we speak. I guess it's 2 years old or a year and a half.
2017, yeah. So
about 2 years old.
Yeah.
But really neat co-commission. Or what's the word for that?
Well, it was like they did have a special word for it.
But it was a commission between 11 schools?
13 in the
13.
end. Yeah.
Wow.
It was the brainchild of Andrew Zone at Columbus, Georgia, and Jamie Nix, who was the wind orchestra director. And they just had this idea that they would commission a piece for me through the sort of American Wind Band Association, going across all the different universities. Of course, that was all working fine until the American Wind Band Association realized I wasn't American. Well, they only do this project for American composers. So Andy and Jamie basically organized the thing themselves. They just got in touch with their mates and said, you know, who's up for this?
Yeah.
So they formed this consortium. Consortium, yeah, of 30. They just, you know, who wants to do it, who doesn't want to do it. And 13 sort of agreed. And so they all chip in a small part of the commission fee. And they all do performances with their own guitarists and their own ensemble. And in some places, the guitar teacher played the solo part. In other places, they got sort of more of the advanced students to do it. And you played it, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
I did bring it up because of that, but it's just such a neat piece.
Concerto colors, so each movement is a different color. I'm actually colorblind, but don't tell anyone. So the first movement is called Albuquerque Turquoise. And this is largely because I went to the Albuquerque Turquoise Museum, which is the most amazing place. It's an incredible collection of all these different things. I thought, wouldn't it be great to write a piece called Albuquerque Turquoise? So that was the inspiration to find the first one. And the last movement is Red Rocks, after the Red Rocks in Colorado.
And King Crimson.
Yeah, King Crimson
well,
again,
right?
yeah.
I'm sure they played there a couple times. Or?
I don't know, actually. They must have done, I guess. I probably did know at the time I wrote the piece. And so it uses little fragments of stuff from their album Red, you know, and so on. And so there's these, different ideas. So there's a kind of blue one, which is much more kind of blues and Miles Davis-ish. There's one called Green Movement, which is a kind of fiendish scherzo. But it was an opportunity to write for a combination which no one's written for before, which is guitar and large wind ensemble.
Yeah, was that the first official piece?
There's electric guitar piece for electric guitar and wind ensemble, but it's the first one. So with a couple of my concertos, that one, and then the Theorbo concerto, that's the first concerto ever written for the Theorbo.
Yeah.
So
the Theorbo had to be amplified.
Of course.
Yeah. How... Because I was about to say for colors, the instrumentation actually works really well, I find, because, of course, aside from the percussion, the other instruments aren't so much of a percussive instrument. A wind instrument is more of kind of a sustain, and the guitar, it is a percussive instrument in a sense, so it really cuts through nicely. I mean, you need amplification, of course.
Of course you do, and you need good amplification and quite robust amplification.
Yeah.
You know, it makes all the difference. I did... my Albanian concerto was done very recently by Pablo Viegas with the Oregon Symphony in Portland. And they had the best amplification I've ever heard in my life. It was extraordinarily well done. It's a huge hall, 2,700 people.
Do you know the setup by chance? Or?
No, of course not. They did explain at the time, it went right over my head. But essentially, it was using stuff... on stage, he had a fallback speaker, and then they had the house speakers in various different ways. But it sounded, and no one believed it was amplified. Yeah. No one believed it was, and they said this guitar sounded perfectly natural, but it was robust enough to cope with, big orchestral stuff. So when I write for a guitar in that ensemble, I imagine it's a piano. And I imagine it's got the sort of the presence and the volume of a piano, and then kind of balance it to that. I would never try and balance an acoustic guitar with an orchestra. It's a nonsense.
Yeah.
It's absolute madness. And also, the guitar sounds so bad when the player has to play it triple forte all the time.
Yeah, it just removes liberties with color and dynamic changes.
I mean, I find it a bizarre thing because amplification now is so sophisticated. Microphones are so good, and so often you can hear a setup like the setup Matt got on his Theorbo was extraordinary. Really beautiful. It's just a time of getting the right amp, the right mics, the right preamp, and getting the sound. And in the end, in the recording of that concerto, we actually used the sound that was coming out of his speaker, not out of his Theorbo.
Really? Huh.
And it sounded more natural than the Theorbo sound, paradoxically.
That's funny.
And so, this is the thing for me, is that amplification is the obvious way forward. For a long time, people were saying, the guitar's too quiet, let's build louder guitars. But actually, why would you spend $10,000 on a louder guitar when you could spend $5,000 on an amplification system which makes your less loud guitar sound good and louder? It's a kind of...
And when it's done well.
I know, well, that's it. It's got to be done well, of course.
I think the trick is you need a set of ears you really trust out in the audience.
Exactly,
That's the only kind of holdback, I think.
Absolutely right. You absolutely do need that.
Unfortunately, when you're gigging,
you
don't have that. But who knows? Maybe it'll be really interesting to see what guitar amplification is going to be like 20 years from now.
I think so. And the microphones are getting more sophisticated. But mainly, I think there are just more and more people who know how to use the gear. I mean, it's one thing to have the gear, but another thing to actually be a virtuoso at making it do what you want it to.
Yeah.
No, but I think the guitar concerto as a thing is becoming a more accepted thing. For a long time, the guitar was the kind of oddity and everyone would have to play a Ranueuf. But I think, gradually more different concertos are being played, and there are certain festivals which encourage, a large number of different concerti.
Yeah.
There's, of course, the Giant Falletta competition in Buffalo. And then there's festivals like RTM Dervioid's festival in Moscow, where they have a night with orchestra every year and 5 different concertos. And every festival there are more different concertos.
Because it used to be we'd only hear around Weds.
But I think the level in guitar has just shot up in the last 15 to 20 years.
And that's probably another part of it. Yeah.
That's a huge part of it. And now what you find happening is that guitarists will be winning competitions within music colleges and universities that are for all instruments.
Yeah.
And the guitarists, they're no longer these kind of poorer cousins. And they're no longer the kind of weak link in a contemporary music ensemble or whatever. So it's very exciting times, I think.
Thank you, Steve, for being on the show. Please join me next week for a conversation with Mark Eden of the Vita Guitar Quartet and Eden Stell Duo. I usually release these episodes every other week, but Mark was talking about the Winchester Festival, which he organizes, which takes place from October 4th to the 7th, and I really wanted to release this episode beforehand. So for next episode, it'll be next Sunday. I've got a treat for us today for our concluding listening samples. I really was having trouble bringing it down to just one piece. So I decided I was going to play 2 samples. We're going to first hear the finale movement of Steve's Theorbo Concerto with Matthew Wadsworth on the Theorbo and the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. And then following that, we'll have the one and only John Williams performing the last movement of Steve's Guitar Concerto with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. I'm David Steinhardt, and we'll see you next time for the Tonebase Classical Guitar Podcast. Bye.